unanimously by vote of the TAC committee. Item number 5, I always look forward to executive director's update. Vinny, what do you have for us today?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. If I can ask you, I know Kevin is listed on the agenda for RTAC and he's bouncing back and forth between several meetings. Would we be able to move his item to now and then I'll do my update right after the RTAC update?
It's a good idea, Vinny. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and skip to item number 8, Rural Transportation Advocacy Council update. Kevin Adam.
Oh, thanks, Norm, and thanks, Vinny. I appreciate that. Yeah, things are a bit busy, running kind of crazy. Legislature is very well into the session. Last week, they finished up the committee hearings. So all of the bills that survived that process need to go through some last votes at the Capitol. So they'll work on getting those completed. And more, the attention is going to start focusing on passing a state budget. And of course, with the transportation infrastructure, that's where virtually all of our interest and focus is. And that's on how much funding is going to be directed to the infrastructure this year. And the state revenue collections remain very strong. And we're dealing with a historical balance that the legislature is going to have to work with when they do set the budget. So there's a tremendous amount of potential, particularly when it comes to transportation for one-time funding. As everybody is well aware, RTAC went through the process of developing a $50 million bill that included priority projects from across greater Arizona as set by the COGS and MPOs. And we had that bill moving through the process. And then the House Appropriations Chair indicated that she only thought that state projects belonged in the state budget. She was open and supportive of state projects being included. And so after efforts to try to get her to soften that stance, which were not successful, in working with the sponsor over in the House, we developed a list of alternative state projects for consideration. And that list is still under development and going through some revisions as rural legislators have now gotten into the process and have requested projects from their districts to be included. Another big development, Vinny and I were able to meet with President Fan a couple of weeks ago and updated her on that process. And she made it very clear that she supported the original bill with the local projects. And so, and since then, I've had the opportunity to talk to the Senate Appropriations Chair, the Majority Whip, several of the rural senators, and they are on board with President Fan as far as supporting the $50 million of local projects that were in our original bill. So this does set up a fairly interesting debate between leadership, and they've already started their meetings as far as trying to put a budget together. And when we talk leadership, we're only talking about a handful, roughly 3 members from each chamber, which does include President Fan, and it also includes the House Appropriations Chair, Regina Cobb. So at this point, I think it's very encouraging that we are on the table as far as both sides are concerned, but it remains to be seen which direction they will take, if they will allow for the local projects to be included, or if they'll go the route of funding state projects. And what also remains to be seen is to what level are they going to basically provide funding in the budget for infrastructure. So that's essentially where we are. Again, that the budget debates are, they're really going to start heating up. In fact, the legislature took a couple of days off this week because of a lack of floor activity that was needed And I think, but really what was behind that is that gave leadership the opportunity to meet with each other and really start to put more attention on trying to come to an agreement. So hopefully we'll know something fairly soon. I think we're very optimistic that we will see one-time funding in rural Arizona for transportation, but it remains to be seen which path they go as far as state or local. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Dan has a question.
Kevin, do you anticipate that there's still a possibility that this would get, in either case, passed in as a bill, or more likely just to be inserted directly into the budget?
We are not, at this point, we are not attempting to amend this onto a bill. In fact, I'll be sending out an RTAC update later today, and that will include an updated bill matrix. And you'll see in that all of the bills that were introduced to fund specific projects, there has been no activity on them for quite some time. And that's indicative of what happens every year. Basically, bills get introduced at the beginning, asking for funding for a specific project. They'll start to move through the process, and that's a good way for that particular project to gain momentum and get support from legislators. But when the legislature starts to transition over to preparing a budget, all of the activity on those bills stop, because it's really the budget that determines what gets funded. And there's, the budget, it's a package of about 10.
Friendly reminder, I need
It's a
your retained
package of
invoice.
about 10 bills. One of them is the capital outlay bill, and that's where you will find all of these projects.
All right, thanks, Kevin.
Anybody else on the TAC have any questions for Kevin? Kevin, thank you. Anything else today? Final closing comments?
That's it. Real quickly, just you pay attention on the federal side as well. We just had another major notice of funding opportunity where they combined 3 programs, the existing infra program, which is more freight oriented, but also 2 new programs, the MEGA and one for rural infrastructure. And I believe those applications are due on May 23rd, but tremendous additional opportunity for rural areas to secure some federal funding for specific projects. So we're watching what's happening back in Washington real closely as well, because I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there.
Kevin, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, anybody? We're going to go back to item number 5, the executive director's update.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, members of the TAC. I have a few things here. This announcement is probably more for the general attendees. So we do stream this 2 different ways, these meetings. We do it through the Zoom webinar, and then we also do it on YouTube Live. For staff, it's a bit of a juggling act. So what we'd like to do is we want to still keep as much engagement as possible, but we are going to stop the YouTube Live. The Zoom webinar is still live. It will continue. Anyone can participate, whether it's a panelist or attendee. So it's still accessible. It's just a matter of, instead of having 2 places you can go to, it's really one place. It lets staff juggle less. So this is the last month we'll be doing YouTube Live for the TAC meeting and the executive board, but just a general announcement. Again, you can still access these meetings live through Zoom webinar. Next announcement is next month, the TAC will be receiving the presentation on the State Route 89A alternative selection report for the on-ramps project. I understand, and I believe AECom's in the audience. I think Kate's there, I believe, maybe Matt. But the report is being finalized. We expect to have it probably within the next week. So as soon as we have it, we'll send it, Allison will send it out to the TAC. You'll have about 3-4 weeks to review it before the next meeting. So you'll have plenty of time. The project management team will present that particular study though at the next TAC meeting. So that's the on-ramps for 89A. Next announcement I have is, Andy said this before the meeting. This is John Letier's last TAC meeting. John, we want to just express our appreciation for your time and energy representing ADOT. Andy will be replacing John on the TAC. As John mentioned before, he has a different role with ADOT. So John, we really appreciate all your work. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been fun working with everybody.
Great, thank you. And we look forward to having Andy join the TAC again. Another announcement is there is a new public works director for the city of Prescott, Ashley Couch. Dan sent out an email this morning. I followed up welcoming him. Hopefully he'll be able to join us soon. So at this time, Ian's still the representative for the city of Prescott. And we want to just welcome the new public works director, Ashley Couch. New ADOT administrator replacing Alvin Stump is Anthony Brozich. Am I saying that right? That's correct. Anthony Brozich. So we'll extend an invite to him. I have already for hopefully the executive board, but we'll do that to come introduce himself to the TAC and share what's happening with ADOT. Safety plan. We did a safety plan about 3-4 years ago. We joined with NACOG, Flagstaff MPO, and it was CYMPO. And we were able to do a safety plan. We're going to do that again. We were awarded safety funds to do that. Tomorrow, Lindsay and I are meeting with the staff from Flagstaff and NACOG just to start to outline the details. So we have the monies. Nothing's gone forward yet. So we'll do the initial meeting. We'll bring that back to you as a TAC as to key areas that we want to see in the scope of work. I think in the meantime, Lindsay, if we can send the TAC the last safety study, I think it was 2017, 2018, I believe, just so that you have that familiarity. So when we circle back at the next meeting and Lindsay comes back and asks for key things that you want out of the safety plan, you'll be prepared to respond to that. Last announcement, I believe. As Kevin said, there's a number of grant opportunities, both state and federal. One of them is the, I'm going to forget the acronym, it's congressional, what is it, Lindsay? Congressional
Congressionally directed spending.
CDS, Congressional Directed Spending, which I guess the simple version is the earmarking from Senator Kelly and Senator Sinema's office. So they get a pot of money that's at their discretion to spend. We have the tightest of window to respond to it. They did a webinar last week. They estimate, there's not a black and white number, but each United States senator gets about $13 to $15 million to spend on a variety of earmarked projects, and they cover the range from a police car to fire equipment to flood control, irrigation to transportation infrastructure. So with that said, we went ahead and for the State Route 89A design concept report, which we have scheduled in the TIP for 2 years from now. And the reason we did that is because these funds would become available next calendar year, and that would be the next prioritized TIP project. So the funding for that we requested was 450,000, 400,000. 450,000. So we have the money programmed, but if there's additional funds, we can use it for this. And we'll go ahead and reprogram that funds with your conversation elsewhere. And then we also swung a little bit more and we went for the State Route 89A on-ramps project. It's going to be a $5.5 million project. You know, looking at past projects they did, this is much on the higher end. Everything they award is anywhere from $100,000 to $5-6 million. So, you know, we went with that DCR. We think that's right in the scope of what they're looking for. And then we just went ahead and swung away with the on-ramps project. It's still in the RTAC ask, so we kind of have two asks out there. Hopefully one will come back. So with that said, those are my list of announcements. Any questions, comments, happy to take them.
I can say that, you know, we listened in on that webinar with Senator Kelly's office as well. We weren't sure what direction the RTAC money was going, so we put in our Cornwall Road, which is outside CYMPO, but we wanted to see if we could get that funding replaced that we anticipated getting, which is about $2.5 million to help with the roundabout at Tissot and Cornwall Road. So we're also having a duplicative effort on that funding. I think if any other member agencies want to apply, there's still time, but it's due this week.
Yes, was it yesterday?
Is it?
It was due last night at midnight.
Sorry, I misspoke. My apologies. But it also needed to be on an established tip to be eligible is what we were told. So that required us to do a little fancy footwork with NACOG, I think, and get it on their tip with the next round of updates. So for our project, but you know, I'm gonna hold my breath. I still think our chances are better with the RTAC option, but you know, it's been a roller coaster, I would say. So,
Very much so. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Ben.
Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 6, mobility management transit update. Lindsay Post. What do you have for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC, millions of you watching at home. As we already know, Kimberly Blanco is out. I cannot take on all of her responsibilities as the transit planner, but I am taking on the responsibilities of the mobility manager. So to that end, I will be attending ASTA next week down in Tucson to represent CYMPO and our region for the efforts of the mobility management program. This year's program at ASTA is a little light as far as what we'll get a benefit out of in the transit world within CYMPO. But I think the biggest benefit will be that Ted Matley from the FTA will be there to present, and we'll get civil rights information, some new Title VI information. So I'll be able to disseminate that to the LCC, the local coordinating council for those mobility management efforts at our next LCC meeting. Also to that end, we did put in our regional mobility management application with ADOT. That is a competitive grant application through their formula funding for regional mobility management. It's a 2-year funding cycle. And so we applied for $90,000 for each of those 2 years, $180,000 total, to help us carry out the activities listed in the scope of work with our grant agreement with ADOT. I did want to mention that I heard from Yavapai Apache Transit. They're back in business, back on the road. They're looking to expand some of their stops in our area. So you might be hearing from me, or some of your coworkers might be hearing from me to discuss the possibility of adding stops in our communities. And then Prescott Valley Micro Transit's initiatives, they selected Q Ride as their software vendor. And is it official, Norm, that New Horizons Disability Empowerment Center is the operating contractor for that service? So that's exciting news. Pedro Rodriguez and I are working closely to get this implemented and off and running. Mostly Pedro. I'll take 1% of the credit there. Those are my updates for transit mobility management, unless anybody had any questions or comments.
I just have one thing to add, Lindsay. Thank you. Just got an email about an hour ago. We put in for some additional competitive transit funds, and we were awarded on both of our asks, to my surprise. One, we asked ADOT for a transit marketing plan for the CYMPO area. We were awarded the dollars for that. We asked for 75,000 with basically chapters for each area, given that Prescott Valley is just getting started. Prescott hasn't started. Chino Valley is established. So we want a marketing plan to help the uniqueness of all of our areas. So we were awarded that. So good news. We'll get that going as soon as we can. As soon as we get the money, we'll develop the scope, get a marketing plan going. And then the other one, to my surprise, again, we swung away and we got it. We put in for an active transportation plan for $100,000, 80,000 federal, 20,000 match. And that is to focus on bike pedestrian activities in the central Yavapai area. I thought it was a stretch in our request, but to my surprise, we were granted the award. So stay tuned for that, and we'll get going on a bicycle pedestrian plan for the central Yavapai region. So good news on both of those. Happy to answer questions or comments.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Amazing what happens when you ask.
Yeah, just a heads up on that, Vinny. The Chino Valley, we're presenting next week to council a little roadmap showing sidewalks and trail systems proposed for the arterial roads in Chino. So any coordination with upcoming bicycle and pedestrian mobility, we'd be happy to share that information.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Frank. We'll absolutely plug you in. So Lindsay and I will actually sit down with you. Because again, each area, just like the marketing plan, you all are in different places when it comes to bicycles and sidewalks. I know City of Prescott has a formal committee. I think Prescott Valley, you all did a study a couple of years ago. It's probably a few years old, but so everywhere is a little bit different. So we need to gather that all and kind of see what it's going to be to take the next step. So thank you.
Any other comments? Thanks for that presentation.
Mhm.
Item number 7, review, discussion, and possible action recommend approval of the resolution 202201 for the 5310 grant application. Let's take this one too.
Yeah, thanks. So this falls right in line with our last item. So this is new to us this year. This is a resolution for approval for our application of FTA funding that I just discussed, that we applied through ADOT for to administer our mobility management funds. This resolution outlines that CYMPO's mobility management work is listed in NACOG's coordinated mobility plan and the recent Yavapai passenger transportation study. It also outlines that our work is done through outreach and facilitating partnership. And so for that reason, we wanted to include this resolution to not only keep the topic of transit and mobility management on our radar, but just to gain approval and support from you all as a body. So we present this to you for your consideration. Are there any comments, or Vinny, did I miss anything?
Sounds good.
I understand this will go to the next executive board.
Yes.
Very good. Any comments, anybody? I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to recommend approval of resolution 2202-01 for the 5310 grant application.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. Did I hear John Hughes's voice, or is that somebody else? Has he joined us yet? Maybe not. I just wanted to make note of that. We already covered number 8. So moving on, item number 9 would be presentation and possible action to recommend approval of the Adaptive Signal Control Technology, ASCT, acronym assessment of need, benefit, and implementation plan. Jenny, would you like to lead this off? And I see where Dana might, with our consultant with Burgess and Michael, might come down.
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. We do have Dana Biskin from Burgess and Nyepel, the project manager for the Adaptive Signal Control Technology, or ASCT. So that has been completed. She's here to provide you with the final information on the plan. I do want to give the group a heads up that we will repeat this presentation at the next executive board meeting. The one difference I would ask please, is for the 3 jurisdictions that directly were addressed in that we would ask that you participate in the presentation. I guess this is our opportunity to brag about the study and then to brag about what some of the implementation. So I would ask Norm to give us an update on the signal timing for Glassford. I would ask Ian for the city of Prescott at the board meeting to talk about the Willow Creek corridor. I understand you all are moving forward with infrastructure improvements. And then 69, Andy, I would ask that you present on kind of the results from the study from the ADOT perspective for 69 and what the plans are based upon the study and moving forward. So that's the only difference, but we'll repeat the same presentation, but with your participation. With that said, Mr. Chair, we do have Dana here to present the final plan to you all and answer questions. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you, Vinny, and I will share my screen and, okay. Let me know when you're able to see it.
You can see your screen.
Okay, great. And then kind of following up on what Vinny noted, if there are pieces, that we would like to emphasize more with the executive board, or I guess please do share that with me. And Vinny, I appreciate your input on the next steps and the actionable items that have come from the plan. So with that, the Regional Adaptive Signal Control Technology Plan study essentially was undertaken for SR 69, Willow Creek and Glassford Hill roads. The purpose identified for the plan was to identify, recommend, and prioritize improvements that will improve efficiency in operations, inventory the existing infrastructure, evaluate improvement strategies, and recommend phased improvements. So our original scope and schedule when we began the study was start in November 2020 with project administration. We identified an innovation task, which included a technology summit, and I'll talk more about that momentarily. Need and benefit analysis, so assessing the existing infrastructure, the ASCT sort of evaluation and cost estimates, preparing a draft plan and a final plan. And as noted, this was our original schedule. Basically, as the study progressed, we did adjust and change the course, both to make it more actionable, as well as to recognize opportunities, maybe more cost-effective or easier to implement incremental steps prior to going on to an ASCT solution. So the technology summit was held. MCDOT and Peoria provided a presentation on the Bell Road Adaptive Signal Corridor. ADOT and PAG provided a presentation for State Route 77. And both agencies, and I'm borrowing this slide from the Maricopa County presentation at that time, kind of discussed a hierarchy of the traffic signal system needs and basically where to begin to have a really good functional coordinated signal system. So starting at the bottom of the pyramid was communications, detection, timing, coordination, potentially then the next step would be performance measures, and then fully adopting an ASCT technology. The corridor that both MCDOT and ADOT implemented the ASCT technologies on had very irregular traffic patterns. So it's very unpredictable, hard to anticipate when there could be a peak or a heavy load entering the system, and then managing that. So that was a piece of this study was, we evaluated the existing infrastructure of each agency, but here's a sample of State Route 69, the analysis period being July 2019, October 2019, and January 2020. So notably outside of the COVID window. And as you can see, the curves representing the volumes per hour are very, very similar seasonally and annually. So when you have very predictable traffic volumes, you don't necessarily need an ASCT type solution. You can actually do a very good job coordinating signals and even look to have multiple time of day plans to effectively manage your traffic and optimize your throughput. So adaptive really does just that. It changes one signal cycle to the next to adapt to the traffic patterns. So as I mentioned, we did look at the existing infrastructure on each facility. SR 69, ADOT had recently upgraded some of the technologies. So it was in fact quite advanced. And most of the infrastructure there was essentially one step down from ASCT. And as a bit of a spoiler alert, we did review ASCT for the corridor, and based on our findings in coordination with ADOT, it did kind of come up, okay, yes, we've actually done almost everything we could do besides this. So the corridor, when we evaluated the level of service and the different parameters, was actually operating very well. Although, in locally, it may not feel that way, but from a signal to signal basis, the level of service was acceptable at all the intersections. For Glassford Hill, there was not communications available. So again, the consideration to upgrade the existing infrastructure. And then for Willow Creek, the communication infrastructure is potentially able to be upgraded, as well as the detection. So as I mentioned, we had the technology summit, and with the input from other agencies and the review of the operations, the travel patterns, and other factors for each of these three corridors, ultimately, each agency, well, two of the three agencies decided it was in their best interest to pursue other avenues prior to evaluating ASCT. With Willow Creek, to Vinny's point, the city's already actively upgrading their signals. So at this time, really the best solution was to continue down that path of upgrading their existing infrastructure and then reassessing the performance, retiming, and seeing how well the signals could be coordinated. For Glassford Hill, there had been some significant developments that had gone in since the last time the signals were timed. So Prescott Valley requested that the signals be retimed along Glassford Hill Road in lieu of additional analysis for an ASCT solution. The consultant team was able to accommodate that request. So that signal retiming was completed in November of 2021. Then for SR 69, as mentioned, there is still the desire to evaluate ASCT in consideration of events and things like that. So with that, we evaluated 4 alternatives. So ASCT from Heather Heights to Navajo, ASCT from Heather Heights to Walker, and from Sundog Ranch Road to Navajo, ASCT from Heather Heights to Walker, and then a no build with updated optimized signal timing. And then in consideration of the Glassford Hill corridor, we also evaluated the first intersection north of SR 69 along Glassford Hill. So that would be the Glassford Hill and Center Court intersection, as it could be influenced due to proximity by, again, the unpredictableness of an adaptive signal at SR 69 and Glassford Hill. And this map simply illustrates those different areas. As you can see, where the signals were closely spaced, essentially is where it would make the most sense to look at doing adaptive. So for example, in this stretch between Navajo and Enterprise, it's a long enough gap that it's unlikely the platoon will move together. So we identified these different multicolor corridors that tie to the different extents that I mentioned that we evaluated the ASCT, yellow being kind of a no build, but retime the signals. And again, the ASCT technology would improve progression during unpredictable traffic events, but overall, SR 69 has very predictable traffic patterns. And ADOT had upgraded the ITS system on State Route 69. So based on the analysis associated with this study, which included a simulation model to evaluate the impact of unpredictable traffic flow and the response of the adaptive signal technology, there just simply weren't enough hours in the year to make it a cost-effective solution where you would experience those types of traffic events. So based on that, we, the consulting team, coordinated with CYMPO and developed kind of a revised study approach. As I mentioned, the original scope had us analyze the cost of ASCT technologies. And again, we had previously coordinated to adjust to do the analysis for Prescott Valley signal retiming. So we abbreviated a study and completed it in November, circulated a draft and then subsequently a final report that documented the findings and the analysis completed. And again, provided the recommendations for next steps for each of the agencies. So just opportunity for discussion. And then if there are any points that you all would like for me to highlight with the executive board.
I guess, Dana, I'll start. I really appreciate the study. I know for Prescott Valley, it was very informative for Glacier Hill Road for our interests. So we enjoyed the effort, and Burgess and Apple's help with things. So thank you. We got implemented back in, as you mentioned, December in time. So we're proud of that. Delivering better service to our residents for traffic and mobility. Anybody else want to weigh in? Ian?
Yeah, this is Ian from City of Prescott. So obviously we've been taking, the inventory and the findings that came out of what we were lacking in our hardware to make a lot of improvements. And obviously we'll talk about that when we go to the executive board. But one of the things that did come out of it, Dana, was you guys did, when you were looking at the signal timing, our existing signal timing, you guys did generate a improved signal timing plan for us. While it doesn't have coordination and splits, it does provide some recommendations for like a single cycle time along the whole corridor. And so we'll use those to then create splits and coordination as we get all our stuff linked. But you might want to mention something like that in there because you guys did in fact provide us some preliminary improved signal timing plans.
I will add.
That's all I have.
No, I appreciate that comment. Any other things that you would like to have included in the presentation or modifications?
We understand is, will Dana do a presentation or just each one of us TAC members representing the agencies?
Same thing like today. So I'll go ahead and lead off. Dana will follow up, and then she'll turn it over to each of you for your respective areas to talk about what activities came out of it for your plan. Is the plan at this point?
I might point out one thing I'd like to point to is our regional transportation plan, that these were the top two cost benefit rates. We had a crazy cost benefit rates. I might suggest you mention that.
Yeah.
Since we're following the plan and implementing what the public did recommend they would like to see us do.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and highlight that. Thanks. And then just a comment from me on this. I think it's the first time, Dana, in my experience, that a substantial cost savings came about out of this. And to Dana and her team's credit, they sat down with me. I think every consultant I've worked with before has magically found a way to use all the monies. Dana, to your credit, said, there was a substantial savings and you gave us the opportunity to wrap it up. So all credit to you and your team, Dana, for being such above board. And I really do appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you. And that concludes my presentation.
I'm missing my sheet or didn't get one. So this is just a discussion or presentation.
Yeah, just a presentation.
Presentation. So, Dana, thank you. Appreciate
Thank
the
you.
inputs today. I don't think there's anything else unless I'm missing anybody. On item number 10, which is review, discussion, and possible action to appoint a new private citizen member to the Ecosystem Connectivity Mitigation Advisory Committee, or our EMAC committee. Vinny, would you take this item, please?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. So we do have a vacancy. Ron James had resigned from the TAC or the EMAC a few months ago. So he had been with the EMAC since its origin. So we are in the process of replacing his seat. Just a reminder, we do have 3 seats that are open to the general public, or what we're calling the private citizen membership. So what you have is we did do an announcement that there was a vacancy. We posted it on our website. We put it in the newspaper, passed the word around. And long story short, what you have in your packet is the 2 applications that were turned in. Reminder for the TAC group, again, EMAC does serve as a working group under the technical committee. So this is one of your working groups that you oversee. Dan Cherry is the current liaison between the TAC and the EMAC group. So with that said, we also provided a brief scoring sheet to you all. I think Allison was able to get back a handful of them. If you want to go over the scores, Allison, or do you want to share that, I guess, at this point?
Sure. I received matrix from 3 members, and right now Roy Smith sits at a score of 63 and John Pratt at a score of 79.
So, Mr. Chair, you have 2 members for consideration. John Pratt. Is it?
Yep.
John Pratt's in the lead, at least by the TAC members that turned it in. So at this point, we'll turn it over to you if you have any questions, comments, or how you want to move forward. You don't have scores back from all the TAC members, so you can either go with what you have or open it up for greater dialogue and comment. Thank you.
I guess that's what we need to talk about. We had 3 of us members. We have what, 7 TAC members?
Correct.
So less than half. Anybody want to comment whether we should just move forward? I know we had a couple opportunities to return scores. I guess I'm asking the TAC what discussion.
I'll say, John Pratt, who is the higher scoring candidate, certainly had more of a transportation related background. I felt that he was a clear favorite in my mind. He has significant experience with ADOT. He's a longtime resident, which is a key, although Roy Smith certainly had time here, but I think John said he's been a resident here since 73. So
That's all 49 years.
Yep. And so I think, to me, it's not as close as one might think, and I certainly don't object to moving forward with a recommendation from my position for John Pratt. But if TAC members would like the opportunity to review the applications for themselves, it's not out of the question. We do have a TAC meeting later this month on the schedule. It would be nice to make a selection today, if at all possible, so that we could have a newly appointed member at that meeting, because we only meet quarterly at this time. So I'll make a motion to appoint John Pratt unless I hear objection or it fails for lack of a second.
I would second that. Ian, City Prescott.
Any further discussion? Yes, we're moving to second.
This is Ian. I just want to reiterate
Go ahead, Ian.
what Dan. Yeah, this is Ian. I reiterate what Dan said. I feel like the application. I mean, Mr. Pratt just provided quite a bit of history and background, and has served in various capacities in regards to conservation and stuff. And I felt like he was the clear selection here. So I kind of agree with Dan on this one, and I'm good with moving forward, certainly.
Any further discussion? So there's been a motion to appoint John Pratt as a private citizen member of the Ecosystem Connectivity Mitigation Advisory Committee, or the EMAC. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously by the TAC members in attendance today. Moving on to item number 11. Discussion and possible action to approve the draft application for the FY 25-26 Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP call for projects. So I've got Vinny lined up here, and Mike Blankenship, I know, has been working for several months with Green Light Traffic Engineering. I see he's on virtually, so it would be nice to hear from him today.
Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. So again, we got a really good jump start on this. And this thing, it went dormant in the sense that we were waiting for the call for projects. And in that time, we probably lost a little bit of track as to what the TAC and staff had worked on, what we agreed on. Just a brief reminder, again, this is the Highway Safety Improvement Program. CYMPO did hire Green Light Traffic Engineering, Mike Blankenship as the project manager. Early on last year, he had worked with you as a TAC and staff to provide the crash data analysis over the last 5+ years to look at some hotspots. Mike and his team also brought back to you some safety projects that in his expertise, experience, data collection would really present very well to the ADOT program. So with that said, we have basically narrowed it down to 4 projects. They are identified in the packets that you have. It's Lakeshore Drive in the town of Prescott Valley, State Route 69 on in front of Costco there, Williamson Valley Road at Stasinski Road, and then the Gail Gardner Fair Street traffic signal. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Mike, but again, the reminder is that CYMPO is responsible for the crash data analysis, responsible for the development of the applications via Mike and his team. And then again, these get turned over to each of the respective jurisdictions. These will be your applications, your responsibility to your respective areas or incorporated areas, and become the projects of that particular local public agency. So Mike has prepared the application. I will tell you, the completed application has been provided to each jurisdiction, but in your packet, you do not have a completed application for all of it, because otherwise it would have been just a huge stack of papers. But the example is Lakeshore. Norm received his entire packet, whereas the rest of you have received an abbreviated version of that application, just to FYI. So with that said, Mike will tell you kind of the next couple steps as to what's happening, and he'll briefly review those projects. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Vinny. And you guys are well ahead of the game, especially since ADOT has extended since the original call. They've pushed everything, added a month. So the draft applications are due no later than the end of May to ADOT, which is what you have now, the draft applications, and then final applications due to ADOT on August 1st. So still plenty of time, but you guys, if we get through the drafts and clean it up to your liking, we can go ahead and get those into ADOT and have traffic safety start taking a look at them. I will tell you that the main things they're looking for in the draft right now in discussion with traffic safety is the cost estimates, which, as you all know, not just for HSIP projects, but just projects in general, cost estimates, especially for projects that don't happen for a few years, have been way underestimated for the most part. So I want to make sure that you're comfortable with the cost estimates that we have and the countermeasures that we're recommending. Those are the 2 key things they'll be looking at in this first round of reviews. Couple things with HSIP process. We can only use fatal and serious injury crashes to justify the project. So that's what we concentrated on. And really, if you don't have a fatal, if not a more than one fatal, you're probably not going to be able to compete very well on a benefit cost ratio, which is what ADOT will use to rank the projects, the BC ratio, which takes into account the cost of the project and the savings and crashes that the countermeasure will bring about. Minimum project size has to be 250,000, max 5 million. Some of these projects have a 5.7% local match. Many of them are 100% federal and have no local match. And if you do receive the award for the projects, this is for fiscal year 25 and 26. So we're still a few years out before you would be able to use this funding to address safety issues. With that, let's just go through them in order here. The first one is Prescott Valley Lakeshore Drive. We did receive some additional information on the 2 fatal crashes there. And after reviewing that, it looks like the 1 fatal may have involved road rage, of all things, on Lakeshore Drive. And the other one may have involved a medical condition for an elderly motorcycle driver. So after looking at that in more detail and having discussions with Norm, those 2 fatals probably aren't really the type that an HSIP project would help address. Now, having said that, I think the recommendation to provide shoulders and pavement markings, obviously that's a nice safety feature, but in terms of addressing these 2 specific fatals, it's really not the type of crashes. So again, after talking to Norm, we were going to recommend that you might want to consider not going after this project, but still totally up to the town of Prescott Valley and the TAC here to make that decision. It does bring safety benefits. It's really not addressing those 2 types of what are really odd fatals. They're not the typical fatal crashes that we would try to address with a safety project. So I'll let you stew on that for a while, and we'll move through the next 3, and then we can come back and if we want to discuss any more on the Lakeshore Drive. So the next one would be the State Route 69 around the Costco area. 2 fatal crashes there. The recommended countermeasures were to provide raised median through that stretch there, basically from Lee Boulevard on the west to just past Walker Road and the Costco driveway on the east. And to really focus on using the low profile barrier that you already have in stretches there on 69. With that recommendation, and also extending the current acceleration lane as you're coming out of Costco driveway and turning right to head east, extending that acceleration lane another 800 feet. So some widening there on the south side. With those improvements, we were estimating about a $1.3 million project cost and getting a benefit cost ratio of about 15.4, which should compete very nicely. In the past, if you were at a 7 or above on a BC ratio, typically that project received funding, and I anticipate it's going to be in the same general range this go round. Let's see here. I think those were the main points on that. Again, if you haven't had a chance, so in this case, I guess ADOT district hasn't had a chance to really review that. We used the cost estimates that were developed in a previous TAC meeting. Again, those were planning level costs. ADOT has also, with the new HSIP application, they have added a couple of inflation factors, both on the design side, I think it's 13.5% on the design side. So once we come up with a design cost estimate, another 13% on top of that. And then for the construction side, I think it was 18%. So those are built in already, but again, want to make sure that you're comfortable with the cost estimate for these projects. So I guess open it up maybe for discussion on this particular project before we move to the next one.
Any discussion?
I'll ask a couple questions if we could. One on the cost estimate. I hope that's okay. We're seeing much higher numbers in our local estimates, but of course I'm looking back at estimates we made at the beginning of the budget year last year. So I think it might depend on when that 13% increase is looking at.
What are you seeing out there in your local projects? 20%?
100 over what we budgeted for, especially on utility projects. We're doubling some of the cost estimates for our projects. It's the good news is I could provide a little feedback because we do have a project opening bids in a couple of weeks, just a purely road project. But yeah, it's mainly on the utility side with pipe shortages and things like that. But even some of our vertical construction, we're seeing supply chain issues and things. So, but design wise, I think you're okay. But as we all know, it's a guess because it can change from week to week. And I'll just say, glad you don't have stainless steel pipe on this because I had to do an emergency PO to guarantee a price on that because it doubled in 4 days. So just a heads up on that. And the other question I had was, or maybe comment is this, Vinny, is this one of the projects that's potentially in some of that state legislature discussion Kevin talked about?
No.
Okay.
This is neighboring it. So in the modified RTAC request, I added $3.5 million to the 69 widening that's just over the hill. So at the top of the hill, Costco, this is the Costco side that Mike's talking about. The monies that CYMPO put in was for the widening coming into Prescott at Walmart down the hill. So they're kind of meeting at the top of the hill, if you will, almost.
Okay.
So I was just gonna suggest if we've got this, you could use that state money to match the federal. It would be an option and maybe reallocate some of the state money. And just a side note too, it was Andy, myself, and we met how many months ago, and we kind of worked out some of the details. I forgot who else was with us, but it was a couple of us. Okay. And this is kind of, we went back and forth, and with Andy's help, kind of improve the details to the median and the turn lane anyway. So. Okay. Well, I guess it's a non-issue if they're separate. Yeah, that makes it cleaner. So, that's all I had. And Myrna has her hand raised.
Myrna, can we hear from you?
Hi, yes. So my question would be that inflation factor, normally an inflation factor will be applied every year until year of use of money. So that could be design or construction. So that 13%, is that going to be applied every year or is that for the entire time from now to the point when it goes to construction? Because then, of course, then you would see that 50% increase. But I mean, you know, that would be my question. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a lump sum. It's not an annual like a cost of living type of inflation factor that they're putting in there. They're just adding on an additional 13% to the design cost and 18% to the construction. But it's getting back to Frank's point and if the cost estimate comes in too low and you get the project 4 years from now and there's a $200,000 overage, you know, if it's Chino Valley project, Chino Valley's on the hook for $200,000 that they're going to have to come up with. You know, it's not as big a deal, I guess, on the State Route 69 project that we just went over, the state projects, but the local agency projects, you really want to try to have a good cost estimate and maybe err on the side of being too high, if that's even a thing with the way costs are going up right now, if you can even be too high.
Yep.
Now, the flip side of that is if you go with the higher cost estimate, your benefit cost ratio drops down. So there's trade-offs.
Yeah, you gotta think it carefully. It's not an easy thing to do these days.
Right. John Latier has his virtual hands.
John Latier.
Yeah, I was going to offer a suggestion. It might seem kind of picky, but just looking at the application letters, make sure you use a font of 12 on your applications.
Maybe it may be appropriate for the group. My understanding is after today, we would actually Greenlight would actually complete the application that we need to sign. They would send us, we actually have to mail that in by the deadline, by the end of the month for the draft.
So the actual draft, CYMPO and Mike can turn in on your behalf. Your signature, if I understand and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, would be for the final application. Is that fair?
That's correct. Yeah,
Yeah,
they don't
so
need to sign off on the
We don't
draft.
necessarily need your signature. Well, we're more than happy to get it. We don't want you to be opposed to it. If you're not going to go forward, we'll pull it now. But your signature will be for the final application, which is due August 1st. So on this draft, we won't need that necessarily.
Thank you.
And that draft, Mike will get feedback and come back to each of your agencies and then tell you what feedback he got.
So that's the purpose of draft submittal. The purpose of the draft submittal is to get initial feedback from ADOT, recommendations.
Yes. Correct. In the past, they've recommended that a draft application be sent in, but they didn't require it. And it's been very helpful in the past. They take a closer look at the cost estimates, make sure we're using the right crash reduction factors, that we haven't applied it to the wrong type of fatal crash, those types of things. This round, they are requiring draft applications for every project.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. You still have 2 more projects, Mike?
Yeah, so the next one is Williamson Valley Road, the left turn, a northbound left turn lane at Stasinski. There was a fatal left turn crash there. $850,000 cost estimate, 7.8 BC ratio, which is getting down. I think it's still going to be a competitive one, Dan, but it is getting down there a little on the lower side. We've been shooting for hopefully getting a double digit, 10 or above benefit cost ratio.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. We agree, it's getting close. We noted that when we were looking at the draft application. Chris Steele in our office did note that you got a 250-foot length for the turn lane there. And we pulled up the ADOT section 430 of TGP, and it at a 50 mile an hour, it looked like that was just like maybe a little short, but it also, if we expanded, then we're running into cost inflation that makes our cost benefit ratio, benefit cost ratio go down. But it looked like just the desirable braking distance at 50 mile an hour, which is what we have it signed out there, was at 245. So I just wanted to make sure you guys were looking at that. I'll be first to say I'm hesitant to inflate the cost much more because of that ratio that we're worried about. But can you give it some thought? The other thing is it's signed at 50, but I guarantee 85th percentile is probably higher than that out there. So
Probably at least 54.
yeah. So I would volunteer to collect some speed data if you think that's of any value, but just give us some thought in your office there and talk about it. And we definitely want to still apply for this. And if we need to, up our local match or something like that to help make it work, or just plan on, if it comes in over, we'll make up the difference. I mean, if I can still land 850,000 to help with that turn lane, even if we got to put in more local, I will do it. That's a good decision on my part. So.
Yeah, we'll take a closer look at that, Dan. And does the county or any of the agencies there have any recent turn lane projects that might show? I mean, because originally when we talked about this, we thought it was a little on the high side, but I think in discussions with you guys last year, you were seeing some pretty high turn lane costs.
Yeah, we've done some, but not since this massive increase we've seen since last fall. And so it's hard to say. We certainly bid out some road projects recently. Our asphalt prices are going through the roof. Our concrete is too. It's ridiculous how chip seal has gone up. just recently. So we're really kind of hoping that maybe things settle back down at some point, but I think that's dependent on a lot of what's going on in the world, global situation right now. And it may help, having a few years between now and when this money comes available. But, am I gonna bet my life on that? No. It just feels like it's all very up in the air. So, everybody's dealing with that same situation. So I don't see that as really a positive or a negative. If people want to inflate their costs, it probably makes, ones that don't get inflated a little more competitive. And I'm willing to pony up a little more local money to try to keep it competitive. So.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely take a closer look and reach out to you as we're doing that, and maybe have a couple other ideas too. So
sounds good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. The next one is in Prescott, the a traffic signal at Gal Gardner Way and Fair Street, and this one did really jump up in price. And Ian wanted to get some feedback from you. And the main thing that we added was $200,000 for utility relocation and about $50,000 right away. And taking a closer look at it with the overhead power lines and it looks like some underground utilities there. We thought that we should probably add that. So the 250,000 brought it up to just over $1,042,000 with a benefit cost ratio of 8.7. So still kind of on the low side, but right now you're ahead of Dan's project. So if one gets bumped.
Yeah, I did wonder about the cost estimate. That makes sense why it was pushed up. It seemed like a pretty straightforward kind of project, but it is pretty tight on right away, and we'll have to look into some of that, those utility concerns. But I haven't reviewed the application, just the summary. So.
Okay. Yeah, and we can reach out to you offline, Ian, because if we can cut maybe 50,000 or so, 100,000 out of that 250 that we added, obviously your BC ratio will go up closer to a 10. So.
Yeah, we do support it.
My understanding that the city is wrapping up a signal warning analysis.
Yes, yeah, I know that'll have to be submitted with it. So yeah, we will have that. We already know it meets one or more warrants, 4-hour, likely 8-hour. So yeah.
Yeah. And just so you know, so you're not rushing to wrap that up, I did check with Larry. He does not need the signal warning analysis with the draft, but definitely needs it for the final for August 1st.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, Norm, I just had a question for Vinny, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Jump right in.
One of the things, Vinny, that is required here, and we talked about is our council will have to approve any submittals of applications. I didn't rush it through, in the early meeting here in April because it's a draft submittal. But I mean, I would anticipate I'm going to put something on council in late April 26th, just to get approval, kind of update our council and let them know that we are considering, we're moving forward with an application for HSIP. Just kind of a, clerical thing we do, make sure they're up to date and they know what's going on. But I don't think that gives us any issue. That's why I didn't rush on it. And since we're way ahead of the actual final thing, but it is just a step. And so I at least wanted to let you know.
I appreciate you letting me know, Ian, and I guess to let you and the rest of the TAC know, it is my intent to go ahead and present an update to the executive board at their next meeting, which would be April the 20th. Not looking for an action on their part, but I will be letting them know what CYMPO is doing. So again, this is at a draft stage with your technical input and review. If anything, I want to highlight that again, we're sitting between $2 and $3 million to bring in federal funds again that we didn't have before for safety improvements is really the intent of mine. So I guess we'll give Mayor Good a heads up at that point, and then you'll also follow up with your council, Ian. So I think that's appropriate and fine. I guess my only question is on that first project, Lakeshore, Mike and Norm, is that project, is it getting pulled? Is that correct? Or are you still considering it?
Mike and I had a discussion. We really felt like once you turn in the draft application, they would say, it's hard to apply these fatalities to the recommended remedy, just due to the fatalities in the locomotive. So I said, as engineers, I hate to try to game the system, say we're using money and there's higher benefits out there.
So are you going to turn it in for the draft review, or are you going to pull it before then?
That's what we wanted to discuss today. I said, I'd like to think probably not. If it's just going to get, ADOT would say, no, this can't apply. These fatalities don't have anything to do with mitigation. I think that was really our discussion. I could say Mike's recommendation, but I think we talked plenty about that.
So yeah, I'm open to the TAC. From a staff standpoint, I'm good either way. I just need to know if I'm going to talk about it at the executive board meeting or not. But I don't know if there's additional TAC comment for Norm in the town of Tuscaloosa.
I'm all for lowering the BC ratio cutoff, so for selfish reasons. I hear where you're coming from.
Are you thinking it might make Yavapai look better if we put one in that's
Can't
lower?
hurt.
It's one way to look at it, I guess. Take one for the team. Question I got, I don't know if it's related to this, but you said 2 to 3 million in safety money for CYMPO.
Well, for all those projects, and I'm sorry, I was calculating in the air, Mike. I don't know if you have a total, but it was what, 1.2 for 69, 800,000 for Williamson Valley. The traffic signals at $1 million. So that's 3 million without Lakeshore. So I don't know what's Lakeshore sitting at, Mike?
600,000.
Yeah, so we're over 3 million, Frank. So we're at 3.5 million. And are all those projects 100% right now, Mike? Or
No, the Williamson Valley Road left turn would have about a $48,000 match right now. The signal is 100% federal. And then the state, well, really doesn't apply as much to the state, but that would be a match too on this Route 69.
Okay.
So I would basically say, depending on Lakeshore, we're sitting at between 3 to 3.5 million of highway safety funds.
Okay. I was misunderstanding. I thought CYMPO was providing some match for that. So no, you're just talking the benefit.
You all as locals would provide your match for your respective projects.
So Mike, let me ask this question, is on the BC ratio, is it strictly the benefit of the federal dollars coming in? If you increase local match, but raise the total cost, does that change your BC ratio or not?
No, and that's a good point, Dan. So the cost in the benefit cost ratio is the project cost, regardless of whether you're upping your match or not. The benefit is how much of are we reducing the fatal and serious injury crashes, and that's based on a crash reduction factor.
Thank you. That helps my discussions.
But help clarify your point though. You keep talking 3 million. I thought this was basically on just cost benefit ratio. We can get nothing or all of them, depending on how we rank statewide, right?
Yeah.
I don't understand the ceilings of.
No, there is no ceiling. I was just trying to, for the board's purposes, to say that we have the potential of being awarded around $3 million. But yeah, to your point, Norm, we could walk away with nothing, but a couple of these are double-digit benefit cost ratios, so they're seeming pretty good.
So here from the TAC group, if you've heard what Mike and I were talking about, we really think it'll be thrown out at the draft stage. That's probably why they do a draft stage. They'll look more in depth and say these fatalities won't be mitigated by what you're recommending here.
And ADOT does look at that, correct, Mike?
They do, and in fact, this round they're looking at everything. Even in more detail, cost estimates, the crash reduction factor, they're digging in, and it's a good thing. They're digging into the details of the crash reduction factor. For example, with yours, the initial reduction factor we were using was higher. It was to install a left turn lane, which we're doing here. So we use that. Then when you dig into the fine print, it said this is for a 3-legged intersection. And what we have out there is a 4-leg intersection. So we had to use a different crash reduction factor, which that was the main reason your original BC ratio dropped down.
Okay.
So yes, ADOT is looking very closely at everything in the application.
Okay. So from a strategy standpoint, I apologize for airing this out in public, but if the cost estimate happens to, be lower to something that is still justifiable but not as inflated, and the county takes on some commitment that it would cover overages, it would compete better, correct?
It would, and it's not that the county would offer to cover overages in the application letter. Yeah, it basically says you will, you shall. Yeah, but that's a good point. You're right.
I understand, and so this then it's a political sell for me locally though at that point. So
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, if we think that inflation, like you said, once the war is over and maybe oil prices come down, asphalt prices come down a little, maybe this drops to 750 instead of 850. And if it stays at 850 and your application was 750, you're right, you'd be on the hook for 100, but you receive 750, so it might be a good trade-off.
Right, agreed. Yeah, I've always kind of felt like, if I could get a 50-50 match all day long, I would take it. So, why squabble over something like that? It's maybe beneficial in our chances if we, not inflated cost estimate it so much to better position ourselves for success. I mean, obviously ADOT's going to look at these things. They're going to weigh in as to, well, we think that's, you're playing the system too much here, but something that is worth considering. So.
Yeah, and the county, you wouldn't be able to take the project on and design it yourself, or not, because I mean that's a bit, that's $100,000, $120,000 of this.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I appreciate that feedback, Mike.
Any other discussion from the TAC? I guess this is a motion item would be to recommend all 4 of these particular projects, submit draft applications. You've heard discussion about the Lakeshore project, whether professionally we ought to give it a go and just have it scrutinized down at ADOT. I'm just being sincere there, the more research we did.
I don't know that it hurts. I mean, work's already done.
Yeah, I agree there too.
Yeah. For me, I think.
Good. Mike, if you hear that, we'll go ahead and leave it in, but we'll just adjust it to what parameters you need to do as a professional to say, you can't cook the numbers, just come straight across in your evaluation.
Okay.
Any further discussion? I entertain a motion from the TAC.
To approve the following draft applications for the FY 2025-26 HSIP call for projects. That includes Lakeshore Drive project, State Route 69, walk between Walker and Lee Boulevard, Walker to Lee Boulevard, Mason Valley Road at Stasinski, and Gail Gardner Fair Street intersection traffic signal.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing no opposition, that motion was carried unanimously by the TAC members in attendance. Thank you all. Moving on to item number 12 is review and discussion of the draft scope of work for the Highway 16 urbanized corridor master plan. I understand this is our TIP and it's something we're getting a little jump start on, I understand, right?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. We are doing exactly what you just said. So we now have the Sundog connector underway. Staff will be meeting with the project team staff, I think in a week or two. We'll be arranging a kickoff meeting for you and the AECom on the Sundog connector. So stay tuned for that. And then to the chair's comments, this is what's next up on the tip based upon the strategic planning retreat of last year. I will remind the group again, the Sundog conversation and the 69 conversation were incredibly side by side. were close. It was a matter, do we start with 69 or start with Sundog? The group decided Sundog, but a close second was State Route 69. What we're looking here is a master corridor plan. I'm going to turn this over to Lindsay. Lindsay will be the project manager. The intent of this conversation is the first initial conversation with you as a technical group. Lindsay's looking to solicit feedback for what you want to see in the scope. The intent will be that she'll bring a draft scope back for your review at the next TAC meeting. So with that said, Lindsay, I'll turn it over to you and give us the rundown.
Thanks, Vinny. As Vinny just mentioned, this is the next project listed on our tip for FY23. This project consists of 15.3 total project miles, and the project area exists between SR 89 in Prescott and SR 169 in Dewey Humboldt. As Vinny also just mentioned, I will be the project manager for CYMPO, and I'll be overseeing the project manager for our selected contractor. On the next slide, what you'll see here, and you're probably very familiar with this as a member of the traveling public, but SR 69 as it stands today is a mix of segments with 2 lanes in both directions and 3 lanes in both directions. Of course, we want 3 lanes in all directions for the entire corridor, but we do want to first start by prioritizing the most critical segments for widening. And of course, some segments are already under design, as you can see there. On the next slide, I just discussed a little bit about the project purpose, why we're doing this, what we hope to get out of it, and how we're going to go about it. The overall goal of any corridor plan, or especially this corridor plan, is to improve safety and capacity. It's a highly congested corridor. And I want to highlight the second bullet point under project goals, and that's to preserve the character of our local community. Here in Prescott, we're unique, and we want to honor that and support that. So we're not in the Phoenix area, for example, Maryvale's like the first master planned suburb. We're nothing like that, and we like that. So our goal is to improve safety and capacity while we're also preserving the character of our local communities. We're going to do this by focusing on a collaborative approach using the 3C process that CYMPO subscribes to for planning processes. The biggest C there being cooperative. And so with this team and other critical stakeholders and partners, I'll be drafting up the scope of work with your help. So I'm looking to you all to provide technical guidance. And the area that I'm especially looking for your help in, because I am new to the area, brand new as of 40 days ago or something, I'm really looking for your local expertise. The traveling public are living and working in your communities, so I look forward to working with you all to represent those communities and the needs therein. You can go ahead and switch to the next slide. We are at the very beginning, and in fact, we're right before the very beginning. So we all know the common scope of work items that we see in a lot of our master corridor plans that we've reviewed as professionals. But I want to think outside the box a little bit, especially to the goal of preserving the unique characteristics of our communities. So I welcome your feedback. I really do hope to get some input on the scope of work. And so that's what I'll be working on from now until our next TAC meeting, when I can present the draft, unless I win the lottery. That's the plan. And so as Vinny mentioned very briefly, this project was discussed at the strategic retreat that you all were part of. Was the TAC a part of it?
Yes.
Okay, that you all were part of. And so that was with the help of, I believe, Kate Bondi at AECOM. So we already have a foundation. You already know about this project as far as travelers and participants in CYMPO's strategic retreat. So lastly, on the last slide is just the next schedule. So send the good vibes for the lottery, but I'll plan to be there in May and with a draft scope of work. So please do reach out to me, phone call, email. I am available 9 to 5 every day. So, and you can see here the schedule through June. And then that will lead us right up to the beginning of the fiscal year. So here I will welcome any comments or questions, or if you've already got an idea of anything you'd like to contribute, we can discuss it now, but you're also welcome to call me, as I mentioned, anytime.
The only thing I would add, Lindsay, we have a program for 50. So 450,000, we do have a program for this master corridor plan. The other thing Lindsay referred to was the strategic planning retreat when we hired Kate Bondi and AECOM. One of the things I asked of them is, again, we've studied the heck out of 69 over the years. So what, again, can we do to position ourselves to get in the best possible position for taking the next step? So, Kate and her team came back with DCRs for Sundog, DCRs for 89A. So again, my parting comment on this is Lindsay solicits feedback is, is there something we could do to the 69 corridor, again, that gets us in a position to seek out grants, funding, construction opportunities, but not necessarily to validate and study, but to put us in the best possible position. I think that's my only comment, so I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Chair, and the TAC.
To throw a little wild card in this, are we thinking about any multimodal type of effort along this corridor? We studied to death. I mean, if you need another lane, I can understand some of the technical support, maybe the cost benefit ratios or prioritization. But there's been a lot of talk lately about, connectivity of our communities. I do know collectively, I know Dan and City of Prescott and Town of Prescott Valley are looking at the connectivity of the corridor over the top through the Sundog project. But is it time to look at, as the urbanization goes, I think it starts to be more viable for a multimodal component. I guess I'm saying a multi-use path, or is that a component we want to look at? Scope. It might be something worth looking at.
I would add, from a staff standpoint, I would welcome it. I would, absolutely put it in there, and I would add one more thing to affirm it. The federal funds that are available now, they are just filled with. Anytime you can add the multimodal component to it. Again, this administration is very pro transit, multimodal, bike ped. So it would only benefit us for that. So I would absolutely welcome that as part of this group.
And once again, transit, we're looking Prescott Valley to expand the current microtransit system. So I think to the point, bus stops, do we want to look at that? I think a nice guidance would be nice if you get a different grant funding source through FTA dollars. You can look at adding bus stops and refuges in them. Other comment I always like to make too on these studies. Can we benchmark against this another study that's similar statewide?
Yes.
I've got two very good. I think that always helps the effort. If it went through a study period, there's no fatal flaws, why not reinvent the wheel on, or I'm always proud of you use something else as a guideline.
Yeah.
Make sure we get the right answers we want to get out of the study. Those are my comments. Anybody else in the chat?
And I'm sorry, can I just add before I interrupt you, Dan?
No.
From the town of Prescott Valley, and I don't know if this is still the city manager had just started at the time when he offered a comment. He had asked me if any evaluation had been done in Prescott Valley on the corridor about pedestrian access for north and south side. Again, he was fresh, so I don't know if that's still a conversation. If it is, that's something, again, that can be evaluated as the land use, again, back to multimodal. You guys have, you got business on both ends, so could there be an evaluation as to a pedestrian bridge or, I don't know, some type of better access? So if you want that to be in there and that's still his position, we could also include it.
Danny's done.
Couple things. And John and Myrna both have their hands up, so I actually look forward to hearing what this from a perspective is, what their thoughts are. But as I'm the liaison for the EMAC, I think it's I can hear them already. They're going to be asking for involvement with regards to wildlife crossings and things like that. So we might as well make sure that's in from day one. JD will email me because she'll see that I made this comment in the notes. and thank me for it. So just, let's just make sure it's in there. And then,
Preemptive, you're welcome.
yes, exactly. Thank you. And then in regards to federal funding, I'm not sure how critical it is because there may be good infrastructure there currently, but as of late, anything that's tied to broadband seems to make good eligibility. So we may want to consider, utility needs and opportunities for increasing broadband speeds or availabilities or whatnot along the corridor if we're doing significant work in there. It often, much like multimodal, checks a box if we can include it in the process. So
Right.
Those are my comments.
And adds to resiliency, which is the new.
Right. Right.
I guess with EMAC, you can't say you can kill two birds with one stone.
Cannot. Or two deer, or two bunnies, or two ladybugs, whatever.
I'd gavel you if I could right now.
Sorry.
Myrna, you're up next with your hand. What can you have to offer?
Hi, so I'm listening to the group discussing their concern with budget, possibly with all of the possible additions you'd like to the scope. I would like to add that there is, SBR having a very strict eligible activity involved with it. I would like to add that there's considerable amount of carryover funds from previous years that you can actually utilize and add to this project. So I'm looking at the federal ledger, and this actually could be a discussion I can have with Lindsay and Allison. But you could actually increase the budget of this and include all the items or most of them anyway, possible scope that you are considering. So just a thought. Thank you.
John Latier, your comments?
Yes, thanks. I wanted to point out as you're developing the scope for this corridor study, I wanted to make mention that in talking with the traffic operations management, there is discussion at the state level to identify various corridors around the state where ADOT has had existing corridor studies in place that may need to be updated. And State Route 69 is one of those. So the ADOT management is aware that there is an existing corridor study in place, and they're looking at possibly updating that, and that maybe that could be coordinated with this effort here. And access management is going to be a big part of that. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Another thing that came to mind is obviously this is identified as a freight corridor, important freight corridor. So let's, make sure we tap into that discussion. What about building in a possible grant application into the scope?
Yeah, I'm all for it. Yes. Yeah.
Something to talk about.
That's a good idea.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Frank.
I think I have one more suggestion besides the others that were mentioned, and I don't know how relevant it is, but if this master plan goes very far in the future, maybe consider a slot or consideration for automated vehicles as you move forward in the years. It might become more and more needed in the future as well.
So like a smart road technology or.
Yeah, I have no
Slot
idea what that
capabilities.
means at this
Okay.
point, but
Okay.
I know it's been mentioned from time to time. I know in Chino, I always worry that there's no lane lines for self-driving cars to follow, so it presents its own challenges. So
In Star Trek, did they need to be in a specific place to be beamed, or could they be beamed from anywhere?
depends on if they're moving or not.
Okay. We're gonna
It's
get
weird,
camera.
it depends on which end you're on.
Right.
It's not a miracle worker, so.
Myrna, do you have your hand up again or another comment?
Yes, I did. Actually, this is to Dan's comment about possibly adding grant applications to the scope. Unfortunately, you cannot add that. It's not an eligible activity for any federal because you're not allowed to use federal money to go after federal projects.
Thanks for mentioning that, Myrna. I
You're
knew that
welcome.
once upon a time.
But I'd mention it now. Thanks.
Any other comment from the group? I think Lindsay has got plenty of food for thought here to move forward with. So any other comments before we move on? This isn't an action option, so if there's no more comments, we can move on to the next numbered agenda item.
One comment, our intent, I don't know that it's going to work perfectly timeline wise, but the results of the Sundog connector and the results of the 69 master corridor, our intent is to be hopefully within a few months of each other so that again, local decision makers can decide, do we want to invest more in 69 or Sundog or both and what that looks like. So that was the intent of moving forward. I know some people have asked, let's not focus on Sundog, let's do 69. We're going to do both. We'll have the results for both, and then whoever needs to make the decision can make it at that point. That's all I want.
Moving on, item number 13, review discussion and possible action to recommend approval to amend the work program. Ben?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Items number 13 and 14 are going to be incredibly closely linked. They're connected with the work program and the TIP. I'm going to ask Allison to walk us through. You have all the highlighted pages, but for the discussion purposes right now, I asked Allison to put it all on one page to try and keep us from not bouncing around. So Allison, will you walk us through the amended proposals?
Sure. So the page on the screen is kind of a snapshot of all the changes we're proposing to make to the work program. So there's a few administrative changes, such as changing our transportation planner to Lindsay and cleaning up some language on page 11. The bulk of it is financial. So financial number one, we were made aware by ADOT through an audit that they performed for fiscal years 15 to 18 that there is $16,000 in PL funding available for us program. So we are placed to put those funds. Number two, as Dana mentioned earlier, we have savings from our ASCT project, $36,000 in STBG funds that we're looking to reprogram. Number three, we have some general carry forward funds that we're looking to reprogram from budget savings across fiscal years. The bulk of that is STBG funding with some PL. For four, we had some HSAP funding remaining on our ADOT ledger. And in working with ADOT, we were able to basically move those funds over to become PL funds, which are much easier for us to program and use to do there. And then lastly, number five, again, working with ADOT Finance and working with the flexibility we have with them, we are proposing to swap SPR funds for STBG funds. So essentially we're using less SPR and more STBG for the purpose of using a fund that requires less match. SPR requires 20%, STBG is 5.7. So this will save us roughly $6,000 in matching funds. And then the orange table at the bottom is how we're proposing to program these funds. We're proposing to program $24,000 into admin operating for the budget items listed in the table. And then I think Vinny will take over the remaining $14,000.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. So this would be the only adjustment from your packet. Since we've sent the packet, we want to make a recommendation to actually remove or strike through the $114,000 carry forward that we were going to pay back. So not to get too complicated, but again, remember we owe ADOT some additional funds. We split it between multiple years. This goes way back to the paving of 89 and I think the traffic signal in Chino Valley. So long story short, CYMPO has to pay back, was it 206,000? So with all of this said, you know, we were able to find 114,000 in the couch seat cushions, and we were gonna basically pay back ADOT instead of 2 years from now. We were going to go ahead and pay them back this year a little bit more. I went ahead this week and decided let's not do that, in the sense that let's sit on this money for another month or two. What I would like to do as staff is actually go ahead and explore using that money. As Myrna just said, we can't use it for grant writing, but we can use it to evaluate. We're getting bombarded, like you all are, of the federal grant opportunities right now. And we need to know what projects could compete best in the CYMPO region, whether it's in your jurisdictions or another area. So I'm thinking there's a way to use that money, most likely, of course, not all of it, but a portion of it, to do project assessment based upon the federal grants. And that's what I need another month to review what we can do. I've already started talking with some consultants, and I think this would be a better use of money instead of paying ADOT back 2 years earlier. So this action remains all intact except that last item that we would go ahead and not pay back the 114, at least today. We might circle back to you. So with that said, happy to answer any questions or comments on this work program amendment.
I might comment, I know there's been a boatload of work done by Allison, great work to coordinate. This is not easily understood, so, or worked out. So thank you, Allison. If you've got ADOT happy with you, well done. Any other comments on this item from the TAC? Shovel my papers here. We're on item number 14. So
13.
We're in the 13 motion. Someone could help me with that motion. I entertain item number 13.
I'll take a stab at it, see if I get this right. So make a motion to recommend the executive board approve amending the FY 2022-2023 CYMPO Unified Planning Work Program with the changes regarding the 114,000 as discussed. That sufficient?
Second.
It's a move and seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Not hearing opposition, that carries unanimously by the TAC members present currently. Then item number 14, moving on, review, discussion, and possible action to recommend approval to amend the FY 22-26 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. Vinny, you want to give us a quick overview?
Mr. Chair, TAC members, so again, very closely linked to the work program. There's a couple of minor changes. Allison, the list looks a little more intimidating, but she'll do her brilliant job and walk us through it again. Go for it, Allison.
Okay, so like Vinny said, it basically mirrors the amendment we're making to the work program. So number 1, letter A, we're just moving, we're using less SPR funds, using more SCBG funds for the purpose of saving match funds. Letter B, we're moving $24,000 TL carry forward funds to admin and operating. And then letters C through F are all the same exchange. We're moving SPR funds from our planning projects to admin operating, and SCBG funds from admin operating to our planning projects, because SCBG funds are more flexible and can be used on DCRs, for example. Meaning, since we are holding 114,000, the remaining numbers 3 through 6 are just basically that same I just discussed, the letters C through F. And then onto our transit pages of our tip. We're updating the award amounts for fiscal year 22 according to the actual awards issued by ADOT. So anything highlighted is a correction to the award and to the agency, and anything in red is being deleted.
And in that transit section, so the reason for the change is we put in projected amounts. And as what Allison just said, ADOT's now told us what the final award amount is. So that's essentially the change there.
On this page, this is our STBG page. just a few changes to reflect the cost savings from our adaptive signal control project. And then the portion that was carved out of that project for signal timings done on Glassford Hill Road. Yellow highlight.
Yeah, and then this is, we have this, I guess we're calling it a parking lot page. These are the RTAC one-time funded projects. You're familiar with the three projects, which is scenario A. It's what we had been talking about. It's the $50 million one-time ask. CYMPO would get a little under 4 million. What we needed to do though was add the scenario B, which is basically sitting in the House of Representatives. This is now the 400 million statewide ask for CYMPO. It's a $36 million ask that is for highway related projects equaling around 36 million. Biggest one of that. And we neglected in your packet to put in the 25 million for SR 89 in Chino Valley. So we did add that to this. So at this point, our tip is reflective of the projects. Essentially, scenario A is moving forward in the Senate with President Fan's support. Scenario B is sitting in the House of Representatives for consideration. So at least that's reflected officially in our tip. So that's what you have. Is that all you have, Allison?
That's all.
So happy to take questions or comments. Thank you.
Make a motion to recommend to the executive board that we approve amending the FY 22-2026 Metropolitan CYMPO MTIP as discussed and presented to you.
I just have one question. Is that number right on that last sheet? Is that 4.7 billion or what is that there?
Isn't it 40 million?
Depends on if you're bidding it out now or next month.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, I see. Is it-
Yeah, both schedules. So.
Good catch.
And the pavement preservation, did that just come up? I know we had a motion on the floor, but
7 million. Is that what we're talking about?
right.
Yeah, we added that in there. So that's, I don't know if that's scenario B, if that's the best place for it, but
It's on both. It's on both
okay, thank
because
you.
it's already been run through.
Yeah, it's
So
already-
it has to be on the MTIP.
Yeah, right. Which we probably should find a better place for it.
Yeah, because it's not part of either.
It's not in the parking lot. It's done. It's moving forward.
I made the comment, yeah, that's why I knew about it, just to get it somewhere to make sure it's federal money or legislative money and represented.
So if there is an easy way, can we make that note as part of Dan's motion?
I rescind my motion and I'm about to make a second motion.
Will allow us to move that.
Dan's motion dies on the floor.
No, somebody seconded it.
Lack of a second.
Maybe you can get Frank to try it. Maybe he can do it.
It's all you.
All right,
Last.
You
ready?
got it right. though.
Any other comments before I make a motion?
Go ahead, Dan. Been tough on you.
No hands up over there either. So, all right, so I will make a motion to recommend to the executive board that we approve amending the FY 2022-2026 CYMPO MTIP as presented and as discussed for changes, including removal of the SR 69 pavement preservation project from the parking lot.
Second that.
Thank you, Frank. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously by TAC members present. Item number 15 is federal and state updates. I don't know if I have trouble seeing who's present today, but
And somebody from Mark's office, but I think Jennifer was there earlier. I think she's out, isn't she, Allison?
Yeah. Here.
So I don't see anyone from LPA, but John Latier is.
yeah, I do know in our second hour here, but John, you got a quick update for us we can run through? You all
Yeah, I
right?
sure do. On State Route 69, we have the Big Bug to Poland Junction Pavement Preservation Project that those bids were opened in February, so it should be going to construction, getting into summertime. The State Route 69 Truewood to Stone Ridge pavement preservation project is currently under design. That's scheduled for next summer. And then State Route 69, the Prescott Lakes to Frontier Village project is in the late stages of design. That's still pending some outstanding items. I think there was some right-of-way and some other issues. The update meeting this week was canceled because of the delay on some of the activity for that, but that's in the final stages of design. On State Route 89A, the Glassford Hill to Coyote section, those bids were just opened here in March, so that project should be going to construction as we get into summertime. That's another pavement preservation project. We also have the State Route 89 project, State Route 89A project from State Route 89 up to Glassford. That project is in late stages of design as well. We have a few projects in our permit office that are currently active that you'll see out there underway. The State Route 69 project at Country Club, where the new Maverick went in, that project is open and operating. There are a few items on that project that are waiting for warmer temperatures before they get the final asphalt down and the final striping. So there's still a little bit of intermittent work happening on that project. On State Route 69 at Kachina, that whistle stop development is also under construction. So you'll see a little bit of work there. In that area, there's still some traffic control that's opening up that east leg of Kachina and an entrance to that whistle stop RV development that's going in. Also on State Route 69 at 169, the bungalows development is currently under construction, where that development will be constructing some improvements to State Route 169 for their access at Village Way. There's also an entrance going in off of State Route 69. That will be a right in, right out type entrance. And then the 169 roundabout project, that project was advertised for design consultant, and as far as I know right now, I think a selection for that is still pending. So that's what I have so far.
John, thank you. I do have a comment. The 89A projects, that's from 89 to Glassford and then Glassford to Coyote Springs or Robert Road, you said? Those are
Yes.
pavement projects? Is that just the
Yes.
surface?
Yes.
What's the scope of that?
Just basically mill and replace the pavement and the travel lanes.
Like just a surface, like an inch or?
Yeah, I think it's 2.5.
It's middle of the spot. The 2.5 is spot repair, and then it's ACFC. The bulk of it is ACFC replacement.
No,
Yeah, Andy may know a little more.
And there's spot repair, the 2.5 inch.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's under design?
No, one of them's already awarded. The Glassford to Coyote Springs is awarded. The other one from 89 to Glassford is the one that's that I think was the bid's open but hasn't been awarded.
I think the Glassford to Coyote, those bids opened on March 4th. And then the 89 to Glassford project, I think that's still in late stages of design.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might appreciate an update on that just for media. If we come to the executive meeting, we appreciate that. I know the newspaper likes to pick that up. So that's the first I've heard of it. It's a high profile project.
John or Andy, is there a schedule for that going before the state board, that one that opened? Is it on an agenda yet, or is
Like
it
I
to be
said,
scheduled? I think that may be what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's.
That'd be when it'd be awarded officially, I guess.
I'm checking the agenda right now. I'm trying to see if I see it on there. Give me a moment. I'll get back with you guys if I see it here.
Okay. Might as well, while we're waiting on that, Myrna, got an update for us? Your next,
Sure. In the interest of time, I'll keep my updates brief. So just a quick update, a reminder, I should say, since we were discussing the HSIP projects, I'll reiterate the deadlines again. So May 31st is the deadline to submit your draft. June 30th is when you will be expecting your comments from ADOT. August 1st is the deadline for the final applications. And let's see, for the call for projects for the 24 to 28 P2P cycle, nominations are due on April 29th to Jason James. If you have previously submitted a project, you do not need to resubmit again unless you have changed the scope of any way or updated the cost estimate. In that case, you do need to resubmit it. And let's see here. Okay, so the tentative 2023 to 27 5-year construction was released on March 18th and is currently in the public review and comment. Any comment periods, the comment period, I should say, is will close on June 2nd at 5 p.m. And last, the unique entity ID numbers for federal awards. So April 4th, the federal government transitioned away from the DUNS number. The unique entity ID is now the primary number used by the federal government. So if you are registered in sam.gov, you can actually view your new ID number. Just log into your agency's sam.gov account number, and it should be under the entity registration record. And this applies to all member agencies as well. That concludes my updates. I would be glad to answer any questions.
I just have a quick question for Vinny. Vinny, did you want to take this time to quickly address Myrna's question about the grants?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Myrna, you were asking for what local public agencies are applying for federal grants, and you needed that information by tomorrow. Is that right?
Yes, thank you very much for that. Yes, absolutely. So our grant coordinator, Cornor Carr, is under the gun. He has to shuffle all of the different government agencies who are applying for different grants. So he asked all of us to please try and consolidate a list for him of all the government agencies who are applying for any grants. And so that also follows up with the scenic byways. I believe the deadline for that was been extended. So that is especially important for anyone who's applying for the scenic byways grant.
So I guess, Myrna, as far as CYMPO goes, and then I'm going to turn it over to the locals to answer your question. As far as CYMPO goes, right now, officially, we're just putting in for that congressionally directed spending that CDS, Senator Cali, Senator Sinema. We're putting in for the design concept report of 89A, $450,000, and then 5.5 million for the 89A on-ramps. That's what CYMPO's doing. And I'll open it up to the TAC. If you can let Myrna know if your agency is applying for any federal funds.
So Yavapai County is applying for the same congressionally directed spending through Kelly and Sinema's offices for a roundabout. It's a partial construction grant for roundabout on Cornville Road at the intersection of Tissot Road. That's the only thing I'm aware of right now.
Chino Valley?
Not that I know of. I'll double check with, some of those go through our economic development folks. So I'll double check and get with Myrna if there's any in the hopper.
Thank you. Prescott Valley?
I do know we have some in Prescott Valley, but they're local projects. They wouldn't, you're not in any state highways. So we're looking for a cross check or.
Myrna, what do you need on that?
Yes, please. Anything that's going after any grant. It doesn't have to be connected to a state highway.
So what about our rural then? Did you tell me? Did you decide on that?
Haven't decided
Okay.
yet. All right, and then Ian, City of Prescott, can you answer Myrna's question? Ian, can you hear us? John Latier, you got your hand up?
Yes, I do. I did check the agenda for the State Transportation Board meeting for April 15th, and the State Route 89A project is included on that agenda.
Thank you. All right, Myrna, have we answered your question okay for now?
Yes, please, if you could just fire those over on email for me, I'd appreciate it.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all items today. Moving on to item number 16, adjournment. Have a motion.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all for attending today. Thank you for your attention.